I made a big mess when I built the piers. It took a skid steer to clean it up. My first string diagram got destroyed, so I built a new one. This is where the shoveling began. The tops of the piers proved challenging to dig out again. I learned that dry clay is basically rock. So you have to get it wet first, and then you can keep going. Hand digging did slow things down, as did the 100-degree heat. There was a lot of resting. And there was a lot of boot sweat. In the movies, it only takes a couple minutes to dig a grave. They must use a different kind of shovel, because it took me about 2.5 weeks to dig this trench. Made a tool to make sure the height and width of the trench is correct. Next, we add the steel. Concrete is great in compression, but breaks apart in tension. The steel is what holds the concrete together when it bridges over soft spots or voids. These little chairs keep the steel off the ground. The idea here is to keep the metal inside the concrete and away from groundwater, because it'll rust and then fail. I wasn't sure how I was going to bend the steel for the corners and the uprights. Number 6 steel is 3/4 of an inch thick and pretty stout. I couldn't find any how-to videos for this part, so I came up with this, and it worked. The structural engineer's design required 6 pieces of number 6 steel, racetracking all the way around the entire trench, so that's what I did. The trench is dug, the horizontal steel is placed, and I only have one more thing to do before the concrete truck arrives. You may have noticed in the overhead shots, the trench is not perfectly square. But the footing is 2 feet wide and there's room for error. The stem wall, on the other hand, and the vertical L-shaped steel that goes inside the stem wall has to be perfect. If the stem wall is skewed or misaligned, the exterior walls and the roof won't be square. What I'm doing here is trying to get a few reference points set up before the truck arrives. This time we got the truck up on the hill. And I found a professional crew to help out. This pour was already going a lot smoother than the first. This is a Georgia buggy. It does the job that wheelbarrows used to do. Once the concrete is poured into the trench, it's raked into place, and the top is then measured to make sure that it's level all the way around. We used a vibrator to shake the concrete into the grooves of the rebar that helps create a tight grip between the steel and concrete. And finally, the vertical L shapes are lined up and wet set. These verticals will go inside the stem wall and lock it into place. I had a little time to kill while the concrete cured. So I went down to the county clerk's office to learn more about the history of my property.
Patent record, so PR 160. Patent records means this was in the land run. So your piece of property, it would have been in the land run.
Does it say who claimed it?
Yeah, the first person to ever own it would have been George, probably N. Cox, maybe. George Cox. April the 3rd, 1895, it looks like.
The land run was a very interesting event. It took place in 1889. The U.S. government organized a kind of reality game show where thousands of men and women lined up to race out and stake their claim in what was being called the land of the fair god. There was a catch. To be awarded the land, you had to stay on your claim for 5 years. And there were a lot of ways to die out on the prairie. I wanted to know more about the guy who raced out here and won this land. So I searched through the state newspaper archives. I got one hit. This is the Oklahoma State Register, the newspaper out of Guthrie, Oklahoma, which is nearby, dated 1906. The article stated that George W. Cox had returned home to find his wife and 2 daughters missing. "There is something wrong with this place," said the husband. "If they are not found, I fear a terrible thing has occurred." I looked for an obituary, but I couldn't find anything. Next up, we finished the foundation by building the stem wall.